Happy Memorial Day, everyone, and welcome back. I'm Steve.
And I'm Scott.
And together we're Backyard Musing, broadcast live, Apple Valley, California.
Science and Technology channel, but we're talking a little politics today.
Yeah, we're deviating a little. Happy Memorial Day again. Hopefully you've had a chance to think about those soldiers, sailors, Marines.
Honor those that have passed on for
Air Force guys who've given the full measure.
You know, speaking of that, on the way over here, I heard this morning on the radio, there's over 400,000 graves at Arlington Cemetery.
Man, yes. And they said City of the Dead.
And they said that they probably do a dozen memorials, I think it was in a week.
Oh,
so they're constantly doing flyovers. Here in the 21 gun salutes.
I would believe that.
And that's not the only national cemetery. There's one in Southern California. Yeah,
they're all around. Yeah.
Yeah, my grandfather's buried in that one. But so I mean, that's a lot of people, right? But anyway, grateful for all of them that have done what they did. So.
Okay, as you guessed from the title of this is very controversial, whether you have a point for or against. We're just going to talk about it today. We'll probably get comments, a lot of comments. So the Supreme Court's review of President Donald Trump's executive order that aims to end birthright citizenship intersects with significant legal principles, including habeas corpus. We'll explain that a little bit later. This order, backed by constitutional law expert John Eastman's theory that the 14th Amendment does not guarantee citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants, has prompted substantial legal debate. Legal expert John Yoo. John Yoo he talks a lot on Fox.
Yeah, he used to be assistant
deputy attorney or
U.S. attorney,
district attorney. U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
Legal expert John Yoo has cast doubt on the Trump administration's desire to suspend habeas corpus, claiming it could lead to grounds for impeachment. So we're going to look into that. Would you like to know more? And if the answer is yes, click that smash that subscribe button.
Well, we've got to notice that law or whatever, not Trump's law, but the 14th Amendment is been abused and just beat to death over the last probably 20 or 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Maybe longer. So, but anyway, habeas corpus is a legal procedure that allows individuals to challenge the legality of their detention or imprisonment. The term, which translates from Latin as "you should have the body," enables a person to petition a court to order their custodian to bring them before the court to determine if their detention is lawful. This principle serves as a safeguard against unlawful confinement and is a fundamental aspect of today's individual rights in many legal systems.
Yeah, I firmly back this. Habeas corpus is a good thing. It prevents just arbitrarily arresting someone and throwing them in the brig.
Right. Yes, and that's it's used every day, right? I mean, multiple times a day.
Every day in every jurisdiction in the United States.
Right. But going back to what I said about the 14th Amendment, I mean, people were just crossing the border just to drop kids.
Yeah, anchor babies.
Yeah, and that's just unsustainable. I mean, if you're going to come through, I mean, if you're on here on vacation and it happens, okay. But if you're just taking a trip across the border, just to be born in the greatest country in the world, there's got to be some kind of a deterrent there, I would think.
Even children of foreign diplomats that are born here, they're not given citizenship.
Oh, you mean like ambassadors or
ambassadors or diplomats, KGB, whatever.
Yeah.
I've been watching the Americans, so fresh on KGB. Yeah, like some staffer in the Soviet or the Russian embassy.
Yeah,
they have a child. This child is not American.
Well, technically, I guess, because I mean, they may live off the compound, right? But the compound is not. That's considered Russian territory. Yeah.
So, and they're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof of the United States. We're going to look at that.
What do they call that? Some people have been dropping that when they've been stopped. Sovereign?
Yeah, sovereign. I am sovereign.
Yeah, I'm not.
No, you're not.
Yeah,
the Native American nations, they are sovereign, and that's their territory. They can do whatever they want on their reservation. Yeah. Right. So you stated, quote, it wouldn't apply to a case of immigration at all. there's zero chance that would fly in the courts. And we're going to explain why. You added, here you would have plausible grounds for impeachment. You would have a president who arguably arrogated the powers of another branch at a time when the provision doesn't even apply. So much stronger ground for impeachment than Trump's first 2 rides on that rodeo, you said. He continues, it would really be a mistake to cause those dominoes to start falling.
Okay. The 14th Amendment has been interpreted to grant citizenship to all individuals born in the U.S., regardless of their parents' immigration status. That key interpretation comes from the clause, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state in which they reside. The prevailing interpretation is extended citizenship to children of both former slaves and others born in the country. So again, this goes back to the
Civil
1800s,
War,
right? Yeah, 1800s.
Reconstruction era.
Right.
To protect, because the slaves that were in limbo, were they citizens? Were they not? I mean, the states had so many votes, like 3/5 of slaves were counted as
non-citizens.
Well, for voting purposes.
Oh, right.
So it goes back that far, and that's why it's subject to the jurisdiction. So the slaves were subject to laws in South Carolina, in Georgia, in New York.
Right. And some of those areas were not very hospitable.
Yeah.
To the black people back then because of
the history.
It's
a complete stain on our.
It is.
On our
it's
country.
It's one of a few, but we've gotten through it. So
yeah,
I hope we've gotten through it.
So White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller said, quote, well, the Constitution is clear, and that, of course, is the supreme law of the land, that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus can be suspended in a time of invasion. So that's an option we're actively looking at. Look, a lot of it depends on whether the courts do the right thing or not. At the end of the day, Congress passed a body of law known as the Immigration and Nationality Act, which stripped Article 3 courts. That's the judicial branch of jurisdiction over immigration cases, and it is. Miller added, so Congress actually passed. It's called jurisdiction stripping legislation. It passed a number of laws that say that the Article 3 courts aren't even allowed to be involved in immigration cases.
Okay. Shall we have a look at the Immigration and Nationality Act?
Let's do it.
The Immigration and Nationality Act lays out the process by which immigrants can appeal decisions in their immigration cases and when federal courts can get involved. Federal courts have limited jurisdiction over immigration cases, which are generally handled by immigration courts. That's under the Justice Department.
Right. The immigration courts are under the Justice Department.
Right. So that's kind of where some of this issue lately, where those circuit courts have gotten involved in some of the deportation stuff that Trump's trying to do.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And that's because of habeas corpus. But also, just a side tangent, you have a military court system, the Uniform Code of Military Justice. They have their court system, and the appellate process is through the federal branches. But it's very similar.
Okay. So that's under the Justice Department, not the judiciary branch.
Right.
The Immigration and Nationality Act did not strip federal courts of their function to rule on the constitutionality of a president's immigration actions.
For example, writ of habeas corpus. The federal can still step in and say, hey, you didn't give this person the due process of coming before the court to argue his case.
That's what they're talking about with all those people that they shipped over to
Venezuela.
And El Salvador. And El Salvador, right?
Yeah, the Supreme Court has suggested that protecting the executive's discretion from the courts can fairly be said to be the theme of the legislation. In Reno v. Arab American Anti-Discrimination Communications.
Was that Janet Reno?
Yeah, Janet Reno.
Oh, okay.
When she was Secretary of State.
USAG.
Yeah.
Yeah,
AG. That's right. Sorry.
General.
AG, yeah. And the site is page 525, US 471, 1997. That's the site for the legal.
That was under Clinton, I think.
Yeah, Clinton.
Yeah.
So the AEDPA, Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, eliminated judicial review for criminal aliens. It stated that notwithstanding any other provision of law, no court shall have jurisdiction to review any final order of removal against any alien who is removable by reason of having committed a criminal offense, end quote. In addition, the act deleted the prior provision in federal law that permitted habeas corpus review of claims by aliens who were held in custody pursuant to deportation orders. So I think the narrow question issue here would be, is crossing the border a criminal act? Can they hinge it on that act? Or does it have to be you rape someone or you murder someone or you rob someone with a weapon or, that kind of crime?
If you cross the border at a port of entry, then no. If you can get through, if you cross the border in the middle of Arizona or New Mexico or Texas or California,
good point,
and somehow get across the wall or find a place where there's no wall, then that's illegal entry, right?
Yeah. Or you take a speedboat and just ram it onto the beach and jump off like roaches and start running for the highway.
I mean, trespassing is against the law, correct?
Yeah, but that's not a crime. It's more a tort. Well, I guess it could be a crime. But you've got stuff like when the branch fell off from my neighbor's tree and crushed my shed. That was a trespass.
That's kind of an act of God. But if your neighbor all of a sudden came up and took a chainsaw and hacked a big old panel out of your wooden fence,
that's still a trespass.
That's a trespass.
Yeah.
And you should be able to call and say, hey, somebody just broke into my yard or broke into my house or whatever. So broke into my country.
Yeah.
Okay. More than 70 U.S. immigration courts hear immigration cases, such as a person's asylum application and deportation proceedings. Immigration courts fall under the executive branch in the Justice Department, not the judiciary branch as federal courts do. The role of federal courts in immigration has grown over the past several presidential administrations, mainly because Congress hasn't updated immigration laws in decades. And that's true. They've been talking about that. What is a comprehensive immigration reform? I'm not a big deal on the comprehensive
certain pieces part. Get put together, but it's not comprehensive to address a certain issue.
Yeah. And again, this is a law that's on the books and it should be upheld, but it doesn't sound like it is. It sounds like judges get involved in where they're not supposed to. That's what we're seeing today, right?
Well, yeah, that's why the Supreme Court has to weigh in and definitively decide. And I want to point out when people are talking about Article 3 judiciary, that Article 3 in the Constitution lays out how the court systems can be formed. It starts with the Supreme Court and any inferior courts that are necessary in the United States, which would be the federal district courts and federal appellate courts. And then the states can make their state courts, but they're all subordinate to the Constitution. Okay. As legislative policy stagnates, presidents have increasingly used their executive power to enforce immigration law to increase legal pathways, limit asylum, or quickly deport people. And as we've seen, just ignore the immigration law and let an invasion, let them just flood across the border. In return, states, immigrants, and advocacy organizations have sued the federal government.
I mean, during the previous administration, Biden administration, it was almost, come over and collect your spoils, right? Giving them get phones, giving them
incentives,
IDs,
healthcare,
shipping them
food,
off to people that were sponsoring them,
shelter.
It was an incentive. So
hiding them in the airports, so that they could continue on, even though they don't have a real ID or any ID.
Right,
just letting them continue on to Martha's Vineyard or whatever,
beyond,
Florida.
Yeah. During former President Barack Obama's administration, the U.S. Supreme Court delivered a 4-4 split ruling, leaving in a place a lower court's decision that blocked Obama's planned expansion of the deferred action for childhood arrivals, which is we refer to as DACA.
Yeah, they blocked that.
Right. But it still happened, though. I mean, somehow they worked around that. Because it happened, right? There was a big uproar in Trump's administration.
I don't think they expanded DACA.
Oh, they didn't expand it? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It prevents the deportation of immigrants who enter the United States illegally as children. Under Biden's idiocracy, a federal judge blocked the administration from creating a program that would have helped people who are in the U.S. illegally get citizenship if they were married to or the children of U.S. citizens.
Yeah. So if you want your spouse to be foreign spouse to be considered a citizen, you have to legally bring her in and get married, or get married over there and bring her in. You can't
Right.
just cross the border. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Do you think the Supreme Court's decision on presidential immunity was a case of the century? Remember, there's a lot of hoopla about how much immunity a president has, and that was big. Remember?
Oh yeah, that was
And the dissenting opinion was like, well, he could go do whatever he wanted. He could shoot someone and not be.
yeah, that was last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how the Supreme Court interprets the 14th Amendment in conjunction with other laws like the Immigration Nationality Act, the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, and the Administrative Procedures Act will most likely be the case of the century, because it will affect every single birth of alien in the countries, certainly in the future, but maybe in the past. I don't know. It probably may be grandfathered in, but that's why this is so important. That's why we're talking about it today. We have opinions, but there's so many moving parts for the law that the federal can get involved because of habeas corpus. But we saw in that one act, no, they can't if they've committed a crime. And does that crime include stepping across the border illegally? The Supreme Court needs to decide on that.
Right, and I mean, I could see, a woman with child coming across trying to get across the border, and just the ACLU just tearing that apart, just and being prevented from coming across the border because you're like 6 months pregnant or 8 months pregnant or whatever.
But from a humanitarian standpoint, you can't turn her away. I mean, at least give her care, and she has the baby. Baby's not a citizen. Send them back. I mean, from a humanitarian
At
standpoint.
whose expense? At whose expense?
Well, it'd probably be our expense to get them back.
If she became that way in her country, then she should stay there and have the baby in her country.
Well, that's common sense. She should stay, but we're at the point where she's crossing the border. What do you do? We're at that point. What do you do?
Coming over,
or she's on the plane. She's on the plane landing. What do you do? Send her right back? I guess you could. She's in the airport. You could send her right back on the next flight.
That would be kind of brutal. If she had the baby on the plane or as she's landing. I mean, there's a lot
in
of
the airspace, in the U.S. airspace.
Yeah, in the airspace. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a tough one, but it's, again, I think it's just been abused. People have taken liberty with that amendment, and it's affected a lot of people, and it's raised a lot of ruckus because people say that those kids should be here. And we know, I mean, I say we, you and I have talked about it in other segments about what is the reason that they're allowing these mass floodings of people across the border. It's to fundamentally change the way we do things.
Nobody has challenged it. I mean, right. It's suicide, political suicide for a president to challenge that, but not for one in his last term. Certainly one that skipped over one term and came back for a second term. That's not suicide. He could do it.
Yeah.
You can challenge it.
Yeah. And he's got enough people in Congress right now. And that's who needs to do it, right? They're the creators of the laws.
We're going to have to see what happens at the midterms to see if they hold the House or if they hold the Senate, or, we're going to have to see.
Yep.
All right, folks. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.